Hello, I'm Stephen Matchett from Campus Morning Mail, and this is Expert Opinion, where we ask the people who really know what's going on in education, what's going on. Academics have worried about tech disruption in teaching since Gutenberg was a lad, but the in-person academic is still the main act, in the flesh or online. But they are about to have co-stars in the form of artificial intelligence. In Campus Morning Mail this morning, 4 EdTech experts suggest change, quite substantial change, is already underway, and they are all very generously with their time. They're all with me now. Josiah Coe is from the Open Polytechnic New Zealand. Michael Cowling and Meena Jha are both from Central Queensland University, and Kung Nui Sim is from the Auckland University of Technology, and hello to you all. Michael Cowling, let me start with you. And let's start with the gut reaction response to the prospect of AI, that it will just diminish learning. In Campus Morning Mail last year, you and Robert Vanderberg warned, and I quote you, "The end game for the brave new technological world without lectures will be apathetic students staring at screens or refusing to attend online classes lacking humans." So, does what you and your colleagues are writing about now have the imminent potential to be different, to be better?
Look, I would certainly hope so, Stephen. Otherwise, we're out of a job. And as I always say, it's very difficult for me to talk about this stuff because if it were to truly happen that a robot took over the classroom, then I would be entirely out of a job, and I don't want that. But yes, Robert and I were arguing, I think, that it's totally asynchronous, totally not live style classes. The classes that were predominantly based on a learning package were difficult things for us to achieve. They weren't pedagogically sound, and Robert's a pedagogy expert, so I was very much leaning into what he said there. But I think what Josiah is saying since then, and the kind of the movement that we've made, is Josiah has said, well, just because we have these educational packages, just because we have this pre-built content, and we got a lot of that during COVID, that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to abandon the live aspect, the interactive aspect. And why don't we have, as you said, the robots, the artificial intelligence as the co-star, helping to deliver that content? And as I said, hopefully that means I'm still not necessarily out of a job, and neither is Josiah, and neither is Meena, and neither is Kwanui, so we're safe.
Okay, Josiah, you, in your piece with your colleagues, you set 3 preconditions we're getting close to being there. And what are they?
The conditions that we require, at least basically for what for the appearance of like the AI educator or the AI teacher, really is that first and foremost, the AI must be able to deliver the teaching itself. And because we are already using kind of like pre-built content, right? So the AI itself already has that ability to kind of transmit knowledge and develop skills in that way. The second aspect really is kind of like the non-academic development, that what a teacher does. So the kind of inspirational stuff. And I don't think AI is at that stage yet. So I think, and the third one is, of course, there are still a lot of ethical concerns about AI. So that's why the AI teacher isn't implemented as yet. So I think these are the current state of play for the AI teacher at the moment. And that's where we are, that's where I'm seeing it, and that's where it is at the moment.
Okay, to which a cynic is going to ask, we can't teach a car to drive. How are we going to teach an AI to teach? Dr. Sim?
Stephen, thank you very much for the question. No, definitely no. And I have to say I am more positive than Mike. And no matter how the AI is advanced, I don't think we will lose our jobs. At the end of the day, the teachers are the workers or the ideas generator behind the scenes, even though AI is presenting the teaching, as Josiah just mentioned, you know, the preset or the pre-designed content. But teaching and learning is more than just the content, especially in higher education. And if I may, the global pandemic taught us 2 things. One, at this stage, up to date, I think technology is the only option when the physical spaces are disrupted. And secondly, I think it's time for us to reframe our relationship with technology. So in terms of versus technology and humans, why not in parallel? So we can make use of the advantages of the AI or digital technologies to help teachers to enhance the teaching and learning experiences. After all, I believe learning today should be flexible at anywhere, anytime, at the students' convenience. It's about the students, not about the teachers.
Dr. Jha, what puzzles me about this is that who is going to do it? Who is going to be dominant? Are we going to be using basically, is AI going to be an electronic teaching assistant?
Yes, thank you, Stephen. And the whole idea is that AI in education will be a support tool. It is not going to be a replacement for our teachers. The emotional connection we have with students when we go and stand in the class, this will not be replaced by AI until and unless we are onto a level where we will able to develop that relational, adaptive, agent where a robot is probably standing there and talking to students in a way we talk. And that is quite far away at this stage. But what it can do is the times at this time where there's so much of budget cut in the, with universities, it can surely help students when they require 24/7 help and they require, adaptive learning. They need to focus on what they want to learn rather than having a lot of information. The whole idea is what Josiah has written and we have written in the report is about when we are collecting the data, it is the enormous amount of data which is getting collected. And when we are teaching or AI ED education teaching or talking to our students, it could be biased because it is being trained on, the training is being done on the collected data. It is what data you are collecting. It could be really, when we are talking about data, it really opens up another issue of data privacy, data confidentiality, who owns the data, how we are going to analyze the data, and how it can be, shared among the stakeholders. But I'm sure that administrators looking at the budget cut, they will surely welcome the idea of putting AI in education into our classrooms.
Well, but that then raises a question, because if you're going to do this, there's no point in doing it if it's going to be cheap and nasty, which will solve nothing. So what surely this means is you are going to need a whole bunch of learning management system specialists with a whole bunch of skills and a whole bunch of budget. I'll throw that to anybody.
Yeah, actually, this comes to the idea of the technology before pedagogy, or the pedagogy before technology, right? And this is always a kind of like a struggle between the two aspects, because the people who build it tend to kind of be very excited by the technology that they're building. Oh, look at my AI, it can do this, it can do that. But sometimes they forget that actually the people who should benefit from that system is the student. And when they design the AI, it should be based with the student in mind. The student should be the central focus of the way that the AI is developed and the way that AI teaches in that sense. So yeah, I'm sure because one of the pieces is by Michael and Bert, I believe. Yeah.
That in itself raises a fascinating question. There's a regular columnist in CMM called Colin Simpson, who's an ed tech person at Monash, and one of the many reasons I prevail upon Colin's good graces in the first place to do it was he wrote something on TikTok as a teaching tool. It was just fun. I'm not on TikTok, strange to relate, no. But I got it enough to be absolutely fascinated by what he could do. I mean, it just seems to me that this could be enormously creative. Dr. Jha, is that right?
Yes, it could be really enormously. It could be very creative, how you portray your, educator, embedded with so much of machine learning and algorithms into it and concentrating on to what students desire, need. It has got a lot of advantage. Indeed, but again, it is not a replacement. Again, going back to what Michael have always been saying, that pedagogy comes before technology. So teachers need to be aware of how the contents need to be delivered, and that is where, when we are talking about AI needs to be trained, it is still that the data we are collecting, our AI is going to be trained on the collected data.
Okay, but that raises the question, and look, maybe this is because I don't know anything about it, and it's a question you've all solved long ago. But Dr. Sim, how do you go when there is an enormous body of research on how people learn in various guises? How do you translate that and the findings there into code?
You actually got me there. Not really. I haven't really thought about it. Any thoughts from you, Mike, when I'm still thinking?
Okay, can I? Yeah?
Yeah, go.
Yeah. All right. Okay. The whole idea is that about coding, when you look into the data, you generate certain kind of patterns. And patterns are based on different, it could be when you are generating a patterns, could be demographic, age, and then we see that how those patterns are being recognized when AI is teaching or talking to a student. So if I am coming from certain background, the AI is going to recognize that. And then based on that pattern, it suggests. And that is what, when we collect the data, it is the AI is being trained from that data set. Half of the data, or 25%, and then we go, different models are being generated. So when we do that, what we do, 25%, 30%, 50%, we take the sample from the actual data and train the model. And that is how our AI learns. And when it learns, when the AI look at me, say, oh, she's from this background, this background, this background, and she has achieved HD, D in her past grades, and this is what she wants. Oh, she's coming from this, or he's coming from this background, has achieved these grades, and has been performing assessment, has been performing these kind of assessment in the past. So it takes actually historical data to analyze and then predict. So when we are talking about artificial intelligence, it is about adaptive, or when we are talking about it, it is the whole idea of data analyzing it. So it will be your descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive. So what it does is historical data is being used to train the model, and then it predicts, and then based on that, it prescribes. So it is a whole bunch of, it is not only AI when we are talking about it, it is also it is machine learning. Why machine learning? Because there's a lot of data, and obviously we can't do that. And there will be a bunch of statisticians coming in to, analyze and suggesting us different ways of, modeling our model which can be used for AI in education.
But
so
I wonder whether that's going to work in courses where you are trying to communicate pretty much hard data of specific bodies of knowledge. If you want to design a nuclear reactor, you could probably teach the core laws. If you wanted to explain the psychology of patriotism amongst the people of Ukraine, it might be a bit trickier, because the patterns of knowledge consumption are way different.
And look, if you want a little bit more detail on the Mina's approach is a very data scientist approach. This is our team, right? Some data scientists, some education people. Josiah has some interesting ideas about this, because I think he's been thinking about what you're asking about, Stephen, about the pedagogy of how that AI actually works. And maybe you can tell you about his thoughts with the community inquiry model and some of those other things.
Because AI basically, the way that we design AI basically kind of relies on a model or a framework. So, and the thing is that actually, like past research, or the past, I think 10 years, the research has not really focused a lot on the technology being based on a particular theoretical framework. So frameworks such as the cumulative inquiry models, these are models of teaching online, as well as like the activity learner model and activity theory model. and models like the technology acceptance models, where these are all different models that already currently exist, and they have been proven, they have been validated, and AI could be based off parts of these models or these frameworks, so that they can have it, or they can deliver an experience which is more pedagogically sound. So that way the students, because like even in, for example, just to use the example for the Summit Learning, right? That's an AI created by Facebook engineers.
Okay,
So
come back to that because you talk about that in your piece in Campus Morning Mail.
Yeah.
What happened with it?
Yeah, so that was quite interesting because they kind of rolled it out to like a lot of schools in the US, but there was like mass walkouts from the classrooms, and the students just didn't like the experience. The teachers themselves also didn't like it, and that bit was not so strongly pronounced, but students generally hated it because they had to sit in front of the computer for like large periods of time, and they couldn't move away from the computer, you see. Afterward, they just like, nope, we're not gonna. So they see that even though it is a very well-built AI, it is definitely top of the state-of-the-art kind of stuff, but it doesn't take into account the student experience, the whole learning experience, right? The students themselves just feel like, oh man, I'm just stuck in like a straitjacket in front of a computer kind of thing. Yeah.
And returning to, sorry, and returning to your question, Stephen, about how people learn, I just didn't want to contradict myself to the piece just now. But building on what Mina said about the behaviorism in a way that AI is generated based on data and based on the behaviors, based on the patterns, learning is more than that. And that's why just now I said, the teachers should be working alongside it, because how about when we need to co-construct the ideas or knowledge together? For example, I play with my Siri all the time. I call him my personal assistant. But after a while, you can sort of outsmart the Siri in a way, because you kind of already know what kind of answer or what kind of direction the Siri is going to point you to. Yeah, it's getting smarter and smarter, but it's based on the patterns. But if I, as a person, changing my behavior and changing my pattern, the Siri is just out of it. So I think my answer to that is, the fundamental line is what you have asked, Stephen, is how people learn. And I think as teachers, we need to know how the students learn and how we are going to best support the students to learn. And AI is one of the tools because it is 24/7, for example. So it can only do certain things that is not within the human capacity. Like teachers are not there 24/7, but when the teachers are not there, AI possibly can direct them to something, some resources or somewhere. But again, the next day, the learning depends on the teacher.
So but that raises the question, like you look at an organization like Studiosity, a long-time advertiser in Campus Morning Mail, which I am a great supporter of, but advertising and the organization itself, but it provides the sorts of services it uses live humans to provide. Can some of this in the longer term or in the shorter term get taken over?
Look, I think definitely some of the stuff that Studiosity does. I think what Studiosity does really well is the interactive component. And to the very first question that you asked us, I mean, I think that you need that a little bit of. I think we've discovered after the pandemic that we need some of that synchronicity, some of that live part of the teaching model. And so I think Studiosity does that really well. I think the bit that Studiosity might be missing is some more of the expertise. And so our artificial intelligence can ultimately be more of an expert, but maybe not quite as good at conversation. But as it evolves and as it gets better at the conversation aspect, well then maybe, yeah, sorry, Studiosity, maybe you're less needed.
No, I think that's a terrible idea. This all sounds like it could cost vast amounts of money to get us to where we could possibly be in a given period. And is it a question of just throwing resources at it as institutions, or is the role here for entrepreneurs? Not in large organizations necessarily, but learning management people in small groups working out their own basis of how to do this.
I think personally, at the start or at the beginning stage, definitely we need some expert help. But coming from the academic development perspective, I think in the longer term, the more sustainable way will be the teachers or the academics have to upskill themselves in doing this, because the teachers need to know what they would like the AI to help them to enhance the student learning experience. So not trying to be a devil advocate here to increase the workload of the teachers, but I think it is going to be one of the skill set that the teachers need to, if this is going to be the trend.
Which
Yeah, and I agree with Khun Nui that it has to be a co-design kind of for a model moving forward. Like the teachers have to be, at least people who have been teaching or in regular contact with students, have to be part of that design process. Yeah, it cannot just purely be a technological kind of process when the design work is being done. Yeah,
which makes the major problem, well, it makes a major problem selling this to the teaching community at large, who on the whole, I think it is fair to say, and what I hear, have just about had it. The last 2 years have really been very tough, and anyone appearing with a great new idea, people's eyes are going to glaze over. So tell me all of you, how do you sell the potential of this to individuals? How is it going to make their life better? And more importantly, what they really care about is communicating their knowledge.
Exactly right. Look, I do this with school teachers a lot, selling technology to school teachers, because as Mina said earlier, sometimes people step in with the technology first, or Josiah said the same thing, step in with the technology first and say, won't this technology change all of your practice? But if you don't have the runs on the board, if you don't have the evidence that it's actually going to change their practice, then they're not interested. So I think the way you sell it is by selling it as something that will save time and make their job a little bit easier. And I think as the artificial intelligence gets better, I think it's easier for you to say, well, if you populate this with a little bit of data, if you fill this with some of that expertise that we were talking about before, then it will serve as a teaching assistant for you. It will do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you won't wake up to emails from students the following morning who have emailed you at 2 a.m. asking urgent questions, because your virtual artificial intelligence teaching assistant will have done it for you. But to answer your question about entrepreneurs, you mentioned a little bit earlier, I wanted to note that that's the kind of thing that unfortunately is difficult for entrepreneurs to do. And Mina might talk to this, because there's just so much data involved in these kind of artificial intelligence systems. So collecting that corpus of data is difficult for small organizations to do. And typically the large organizations are the ones that tend to do it. And we saw just this week, Google talking about their massive artificial intelligence chatbot that they claimed, that one of their engineers claimed had gained sentience, right? And he did that because it had this large corpus of data that it was working through that made it look like it was a human being. Of course, Google then walked that back very quickly on behalf.
I wonder why they did that, Michael.
What's that?
I wonder why they did that.
Oh, well, yeah, they just were, yeah, I'm sure they were just being conservative, But
Yeah.
And the biggest
And
problem would be, yep, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mina.
Yes, and the biggest problem would be when we are talking about AIED, it has to be customized for a particular university, because university to university, they would be a little bit hesitant sharing their internal data. And this data requires students, how they are interacting with their learning management system, looking at the resources, what assessments they are doing, and how they are performing. But the biggest advantage, what I can see having this system standing in the class as a support of teacher, is freeing teachers' time. And 24/7 help to, most of the time when I was looking into, what kind of help students are coming back to you, again and again, looking for some document, where can I find this help? When is the assessment due? What can be done? So those kind of things can be, those things can be actually hard coded into AIED, which is really easy, So it is really freeing up teachers' time so that they can work more on pedagogical issues rather than, responding on to the emails of students. So where you have got a class of, 500 students, and imagine that how many emails would be sitting in your inbox every morning when you get up, 5 o'clock. And that that kind of things get, time is saved and you are relieved from there. So that is one of the biggest point, and time is, everything, I guess.
What would you say to all of you? What would you say to a DVC who came to you and said, "We're sold. What's it going to cost? What will we get in 5 years?"
This is the question for Josiah. He's the one.
Well, I guess I don't know how much it will cost, to be really
Don't
honest.
give it to me in a number, but give it to me in a percentage. What will this save on a faculty budget?
Crystal balling is so hard.
It is.
But
Okay, we'll pass on that. What would you say you could deliver in 5 years?
I think what is the clear, at least the clear so-called savings or cost savings that university can see would be the fact that you would need possibly less markers, possibly less, in a way, some less, I guess, less teaching aids even. Yeah. And especially since we are using pre-built packages, right? So the fact is that the AI can, and to some AIs can even kind of content create to a certain extent. So you can reduce the number of so-called like learning designers to a certain extent. So you do save a lot of manpower. You save a lot of so-called managing of these people. And the thing is that you can actually scale up your enrollments. So you can have more students because it's just a system, right? Number of students coming in, you just need to expand your system capability to have more or less students. With one student, the AI is the same. With 100 students, the AI is still the same. So that would be kind of the so-called the savings, at least from the financial point of view.
So
yeah,
that sounds to me like it might work particularly well, less in undergraduate education, but certainly in areas of training, particularly in micro-credentials, where you've got large numbers of people who are doing this casually and informally in their own time, etc.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
And I would suggest to the senior management and say, we have already spending like millions of dollars on different digital tools at the university anyway. So it's just one more tool to enhance the student experience for the longer terms of benefits. And the other selling point could be, when there is no choice, it is the choice. So, and that's what I learned from my academic development job in the daily basis in the last 2 years during global pandemic. Before global pandemic, teachers, academics, or students can choose not to use any form of digital technologies. But when there's no choice, they have to learn it. And so using Zoom, using LMS, but we all know that is not very healthy for the well-being. So you can't stay at the screen for the long time, and then some other new issues emerge, like lack of student engagement, so on and so forth. So this could be one of the solutions to enhance the student engagement before and after the class. And you come to the class for actual interaction with the teachers.
I've got one for you. I wonder that might be a really good sell. It will lift an institution's ratings on undergraduate teaching in QUILT, in the quality indicators for learning and teaching. Anything, I would imagine, anything that can improve and can support teachers has got to be a good thing.
That's right. It is kind of about student support, not about expertise. It is about better student support. So yes, like our hypothetical DVC, when he comes and asks us, we say, yes, you give better student support. Your students would feel much more engaged. They feel like their university is much more accessible. And all of those kinds of measures are the kinds of measures that we use in QUILT, right? So maybe that's the selling point for our hypothetical DVC.
Yeah, and also not only for undergraduates, I have to say, now that I'm working at graduate research school, I have to say for postgraduates particularly, because most of the time they are by themselves, especially doctoral students in this part of the world. So this could be a way to build a sense of community for the postgraduates at a distance.
And could it help in industries where you need to scale up? You need a lot of people really fast. I'm thinking childcare. I mean, the New South Wales and Victorian governments have announced we're going to have a vast expansion of access to childcare. Question is, who's going to teach and it needs a lot of undergraduate training. CQU is doing something new on this, I think.
Indeed, we are. But yeah, that's we've got to be a little bit careful because we don't want to scare all of the teachers, the teachers of those, and we've got to be very careful that we talk about it being a support for learning. But yes, certainly at those lower levels, right, where those questions that the students might ask may be a little bit more procedural, maybe about finding their way in the university system, about when the assessment's due, how do I submit it, how do I find this document, how do I do this kind of thing. Those are the great kinds of questions that this kind of artificial intelligence can deal with. And as Josiah mentioned earlier, it scales really, really well. So 100 students or 1,000 students, the AI doesn't care, right? But 100 students versus 1,000 students that I've got to talk to makes a heck of a lot of a difference to me as a human.
Which is a great way to end. I could talk to you for another hour easily, but I know you're all busy and you've all got work to do. Look, thank you very much for doing this. It's very kind of you. I know you're busy. Josiah Ko, Michael Cowling, Kung Nui Sim and Mina Jha, thank you all for being here this afternoon. This is Expert Opinion, and I have been talking to experts, and we're out. Thanks very much.